saying this for the people who joined us right at 5 o'clock. I'm going to welcome you all again to this webinar. We're really pleased that you could make the time to be with us today. This is a webinar on Make Good TV for Kids, hosted by Akili Network. Akili Network is a startup in Kenya that launched Akili Kids, the very first children's TV channel in Kenya. We're really pleased to be the #1 children's television in Kenya. We've got a great panel here of the producers of some of our best content. And what I'm going to do is I will ask our panelists to introduce yourself, give us your name, the channel, the content that you produce, and why don't you tell us your favorite children's TV, what was your favorite program when you were 5, 7 years old? What was the program that you really loved watching? If you watched TV at that time, what was your favorite program at that time? So once you've introduced yourselves, we will go into the presentations. We will start with Jesse. Jesse will give his presentation. Jesse is the president and founder of Akili Network. Then we will go to Gosia, who will give her presentation. She's a producer of Engine. And then we'll go to Christina, who will give her presentation. We've already received some questions from panelists, so I will engage the panelists in a Q&A, a little conversation to bring out some of the questions that we've already received. And then after that, we will open up to the questions that we from our panelists today. So for our registrants today, if you're just joining us, you have the Q&A option. Please drop your questions there. You can also send us a question at pitch@Akili Kids. So welcome once again, and we'll get started with introductions. We'll start with Jesse.
Hello, I'm Jesse Soleil. I'm the president at Akili Network, co-founder, and I've been in the children's education entertainment business for much longer than I care to share. But I started my career at Scholastic, the largest children's publisher in the world, developing educational technology. I ran the research and development lab, and when I left, I was the acting president of the digital division. That said, I've been producing television for quite a while, and my partner and I, when we started Akili Network, had actually been working on this thing for 8 years. So, so pretty cool to be here now.
What was your favorite TV program when you were 5 or 7 years old?
So dating myself, well, I guess we're all going to date ourselves. So we talk about 5 to 7. I was a big fan of Mr. Rogers. So I watched, some of the first Mr. Rogers programs and just thought he was the coolest thing on the planet, which is pretty strange now looking back at Mr. Rogers, kind of an old dude with soft shoes and a sweater. So yes, Mr. Rogers.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you. Gosia?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gosia Lukomska. I'm the head producer of Engine. And Engine is produced by Peripheral Vision International, PVI. We're a nonprofit that creates educational entertainment. Engine is our first show for such young audiences. We previously would produce for young adults, so mostly youth. So we're doing this for the first time, and we've been learning a lot. And growing up, I grew up in Poland, and that was in the mid '80s, when I was the age that you're talking about. So there was not so much available, and most of the content was coming from the Eastern Bloc. But there were these amazing cartoons, either Russian or Czech or Polish, and one of them was called Krecik, and it was about this cute mole, the little black blind animal that lives underground and digs tunnels. And he would make friends with other animals in the forest and help everyone. And right now I have a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I make them watch those DVDs from the 80s, and they love Krecik too. So there's something timeless about, you know, old school stuff like Mr. Rogers or Krecik. Yeah.
Thank you. Christina?
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Bwana. I'm the COO at Ubongo, and we produce Akili and Me and Ubongo Kids. And we also have a show for caregivers that help the wholesome development of the child. We started in 2013. That's when the company was founded, and we released our first show, our first episode of Ubongo Kids in 2014. And it started off as a live TV show for kids, so a talk show. We were just trying out different formats, and then we realized, okay, that might not be, that's more entertaining for adults, but not necessarily for kids. So then we thought of coming up with animations, and one of the co-founders is actually an animator, and he's still with us until today. So that's how we created Ubongo Kids, our flagship show for ages 6 to 13, and then soon after that we created Akili and Me, which is ages 3 to 5. And I think growing up, I moved around a lot. So I remember watching cartoons in local languages wherever we were. But one of maybe the English cartoons I remember are Animaniacs and Dexter's Laboratory and Pinky and the Brain and all those classic Cartoon Network shows.
Yeah, great. Yeah, it is a question that can really date us. So fantastic. Thank you so much for your introductions. And for the people who've just joined us, this is the Make Good TV for Kids webinar hosted by Akili Network. Akili Network is a broadcaster of Akili Kids, the #1 children's TV station here in Kenya. We're so pleased that you made the time to join us here today. We've just had the introduction from our panelists, and we're going to go into the presentations. So each of our panelists will give us a presentation, and then we'll have a little conversation, and then we'll be taking your questions. So please drop your questions in the Q&A section of the webinar. You'll see that in your Zoom browser. You can also just chat your question if you would like. You can also send us questions at pitch@Akili Kids. So please, yeah, just ask. We've set some good time to really respond to the questions that you have. So to send us your questions. All right, so we're really excited to get started. And our first presentation today will be from Jesse Soleil, the founder of Akili Network. And he is also the director for Boom na Wabi, the little interstitial that we produced, and that has just been nominated for a Kalasha Award, which we're so excited about. Over to you, Jesse.
Okay, thanks again. Thanks for everybody for being here. Kaburo, do me a favor, hold me to my 11 minutes, because you know I have a tendency to talk. So just go, okay, that's it, done, you're done. All right, next slide, please. Oh, do I control it? Can I do it? Oh, amazing. Okay, so who are we? Yeah, we created Akili Kids, and we're free to air, and we're kids entertainment, mostly focused on learning outcomes, and I'll talk more about what that means in a sec. Next slide. Awesome. So two things I really want to take you through, and I'm going to start out in the presentation just talking about some of our goals and some of our theories, and then I'll take you into some of the practical things that we've learned over the years and that we're trying to apply here. So first, Piaget's theory of child development sounds very complex. Yes, it is, but it really is about how receptive kids are at different ages, and this is something that I think is really important as you're developing content for children, whether it's television or books or apps or anything like that. What are kids actually capable of? And then the other piece of this is the use of television as an educational technology. And people don't necessarily think about TV as an ed technology, but quite frankly, it's the first educational technology after radio, which was an educational technology. So there's a lot of study, a lot of work that's been done. And let's jump to the next slide. And basically, this is about the science behind kids' TV. So Piaget's stages of cognitive development. So don't worry, you'll all get copies of this presentation afterwards, and hopefully will be helpful. The idea really is that between the ages of 0 and 2, kids are just figuring out object persistence and how to hold things, and that things actually exist. And so being able to creating programming for children of that age, you've probably seen programs like Teletubbies and things like that are kind of crazy for an adult to watch, but for kids, oftentimes it's quite entertaining, really, just because things show up and then they disappear and then they return, and it helps build on some of that object persistence and developmental stages in that age group. Pre-op stage between 2 and 7, really, it's learning about pretend play. It's learning in concrete terms like, oh, this is water in the case of this. Water exists. It's a thing. It's wet. It can be drunk. It falls out of the sky. It's rain. So basic concepts are really important. And it's not just, I think the thing to note here is it's not just about what we want to tell kids. It's actually what they're able to retain. It's what they understand. And when complex thoughts that are too complex for 2 to 7-year-olds come in, it's hard for them to parse and they don't retain. So when you're designing something for a certain age, you really have to understand what kids are actually capable of keeping in their brains. Between the ages of 7 and 11, you see the image. It's more about, look, these two glasses can hold the same amount of water, but the glasses are different. It looks like it's different. So basically creating logical patterns and reasoning around ideas, around what water can do as an object. And then as they get older, as kids turn into tweens and teens, they develop more operational views of of concepts. So anyway, bottom line is brains can only hold what they can hold. And so designing for those brains is actually really important when you understand who the target is, who you're actually making something for. Next slide. So TV as an educational technology, a couple of the pioneers, one that I already mentioned, Mr. Rogers. Sesame Street is also a pioneering use of television as a technology. And if you haven't ever seen it, I highly recommend checking out Joan Gantz Cooney's first publication, which was what led to the development of Sesame Street. And the link is here. Joan Gantz Cooney is the founder of Sesame Workshop, or back in the day it was Children's Television Workshop. And Fred Rogers, well, if you don't know who Fred is, I highly recommend checking out the documentary, Won't You Be My Neighbor? Really brilliant guy, and also a pioneer, not just in children's television, but in being able to articulate that kids have feelings too, that helping develop kids' feelings and their self-awareness is actually just as important, if not more important, than academic success. So next slide. So with that in mind, I wanted to share that part of why we're doing what we're doing, why Akili Network exists and Akili Kids launched, is because oftentimes children are measured they're measured by the success of their academic careers. Like if they got an A on their report card, then they're great, and that generally, many parents feel like that's the indicator of their future success. And quite honestly, that's one small part of what a healthy whole child has. So being able to think about physical health and mental health, their relationships and social emotional development, who they are and their self-worth and value, being able to help develop their ability to think strategically, critically, and solve problems. Those are all kind of non-measured values that really aren't necessarily part of the KICB curriculum, for example. And so we really want, you can go back for a sec, sorry. We really want to make sure that not only are kids aware and their families are aware of their value, but also that we build in the resilience of being able to have community and environmental awareness, and also build on healthy relationships. So next one, please. Okay, so the bottom line is this. We don't want to hit kids over the head with education. We really love it when kids accidentally learn. And that's when, you're in a class and a Pythagorean theorem shows up on the board and it's a triangle and you suddenly realize, hey, I know that. How do I know that? That accidental learning is actually some of the most important learning that you can do, because it isn't purposeful. It's through play, it's through entertainment, and it's kind of subliminal messaging, believe it or not. Next slide. So learning outcomes, what are they and how do we think about this? All right, next slide. So these are some practical tips, and I'm probably coming to the end of my 11 minutes, but one thing I really wanted to say is, you have to think about what are the indicators that help kids know how they're going to grow up. So in this one, I picked reading. The number one indicator if a child will develop a lifelong love of reading, believe it or not, it's if their parents read and if there are books in the house. So it has nothing to do with them being told that they should learn to read or that they should love reading. It is absolutely modeled behavior. And so when we think about developing products for television for kids, it's definitely character driven, it's definitely story driven, and definitely presentation matters, although many times people think that by making something animated that suddenly it's going to be appropriate for kids, and that's not actually true. Animation without story or characters that they identify with is irrelevant. The last two bits here, audience, don't go to, this is the last slide, so you don't have to jump ahead. Audience connection is really important. It's something we did with Boom to Wabi, and it's about breaking the fourth wall. And it's one of the things that we did with Wabi is we had her talk directly to the child on the other side of the screen. And so why that's important, to be able to tell someone, hey, look, everyone, what do you think of this, is different than asking the question, well, what do you think of this? It's addressing a single person. And if you're trying to create a relationship with a kid on the other side of the screen, it's not about addressing the classroom or the breadth of the audience. It's about addressing him or her sitting there on the other side. Mr. Rogers was the one who really pioneered that. And I think last but not least is definitely the idea of modeling the behaviors you want. I'm sure you all heard that thing when you were a kid, do as I say, not as I do. That's the biggest ridiculousness that ever came out of an adult's mouth, because we all learn behavior from modeling. When someone acts some way, we learn how to behave that way. So telling someone not to behave that way, but then behaving in another way is actually teaching exactly the wrong message. So what do we want to do with kids? We don't want to beat them over the head with what we want them to learn. We want to model the behavior, model the behavior with characters that they like, with stories that matter, in a presentation that matters, and making sure that you are connected to the audience at all times. Actually, one last thing that I want to throw out about that audience connection and breaking the fourth wall. Programs like Dora the Explorer, where she stops and she says, can you help me count the stars? Those are really important moments. Those actually ask for engagement. They ask for participation from the child on the other side of the screen. And so, it's, like I said, not just about creating the stories, but really building in moments where the child matters, their engagement is important, and they help solve the problem in real time. And that's one of the ways that not only TV can be effective in helping kids learn things through watching, but actually that's a participation moment, that moment of play, that moment of being able to help out the characters on the screen. So I'm done. There was a lot in there, and I could talk about this stuff all day, but I won't bore you, and I'll let my esteemed colleagues do their presentations. So thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. That was great. That's a real deep dive into the science and the psychology of children's television and why we create content for kids and why it's so important. So thank you so much for that. Our participants, remember, you can ask questions. Please drop your questions in the Q&A section. on the Zoom application. You can chat your question, or you can send us a question at pitch@akilikids.com. So we'd love your questions. We want to answer to whatever particular things you would want to understand a little better. Jesse, you talked about modeling behavior, which is so important. And the great thing is that TV gives us such a great opportunity to start demonstrating that behavior to children. And one of the shows that we have that does that really well is Engine. So at Akili Kids, we schedule our content according to age groups, and we have 3 particular age groups that we target. So we have the preschools, 6 years and under, and then there's the 7 to 10 years old that have content that's for early, appropriate for 7 to 10, there's the under 6 years old, the 7 to 10 years old, and then the 11 to 14 years old. So for our age band of over 6 years old, we have a show called Engine that looks at science and it's live action. We premiered it a month and a half ago, and it's doing really well. And so we're really pleased to have Gosia, the producer of that content, to make a presentation to us today. So over to you, Gosia.
Okay, yeah, thanks so much, Bwana. Thanks, Jesse, for your presentation. I'm so happy you said all these things, because it seems like we are aligned in the way we're thinking and we're in the right track. Like I said, it's the first time we're actually creating content for such a young audience. So I think, can we start with the trailer so that everyone, it's a 60-second trailer of our show so that everyone can just get a taste of what it looks like, what it sounds like, and then I'll tell you more about it.
What makes up the air we breathe?
Welcome to Engine, an educational show for all the family.
How do the planets float so weightlessly? Let's go! Let's go! It's technology. Let's go! Let's go! Science, you and me. Let's go! Let's go! We're learning every day. Let's go! Let's go! Engine leads the way.
Get ready for some exciting learning and fun teaching.
Okay, thanks, guys. It didn't play very well on my screen, but anyway, I'll share the link to the trailer if you want to watch it independently later. So Engine stands for Next Generation TV, and it's pronounced engine, like the engine that keeps things moving. And it's a science show for, we say, young learners. So yeah, our target audience is 7 to 10. But as we've discovered, kids who are younger and also older and their parents have been enjoying the show. So we can say it's a family show. We came up with it in April when COVID started in Africa and schools were closing and lockdowns were being imposed. And some of our other programs had to be stopped. And basically what happened is we had a pile of money that we needed to shift, and we really wanted to do something meaningful for all the kids who are at home, unable to go to school, unable to play with other kids and engage with sports activities or other activities that they would usually be involved in as part of their day and part of their learning. And we came up with Engine. So it's a variety show. It's comprised of several segments, and I'll tell you more about them. But in general, it's about science. So from math. Oh, actually, sorry. Go back. Back to the slide. Yes, more about that later. But the important thing is that we designed it from the get-go as a Pan-African show. So we wanted it to be distributed in multiple countries. So we decided the language of production should be English. And we did not have the funds to dub it in local languages, but we're hoping that one day this can happen. Sorry, go back to the first one, to the first slide still. Okay, one more thing on that one. So season 1, it's 13 episodes that are half hour, so between 24 and 26 minutes, and each episode is scripted around a particular theme, like for example, energy, space, bees, water, etc. Next slide, please. So our goal was, we didn't want to replace the classroom. We didn't want to model this on any national curriculum. We knew that this would be an impossible endeavor to try to replace the school, and also we didn't necessarily want to do that. What we wanted to do is to create a culture of learning, to make learning fun and accessible in a home environment, get kids to love learning and to want to discover, even with their limited settings or limited resources. This show promotes positive gender norms, and it does it in a variety of ways, from the host being primarily female, so the teachers who appear are female, the hosts mostly. We show girls engaging in science experiments, so that this myth that science is for boys can be busted. The show also includes health tips, so it was very important for us to show how people can stay safe and resilient and healthy in the pandemic. And by healthy, we mean healthy in a variety of ways, including their mental health. And next slide, please. So the core of the show are mini lessons delivered by teachers in a studio. And it was very important for us also to cast real teachers and to connect them in the pandemic, in these lockdowns, to their students. So teachers deliver lessons on a particular subject in the studio. We also have a segment that's called Africa Teacher Challenge, where we crowdsourced lessons from teachers from all over Africa. We basically invited teachers to send us clips recorded on their camera phones or someone else's camera phone if they didn't have a phone camera, and send it to us, and then we enhance it with animation and sound design and include it. Like Jesse said, physical health and mental health is very important to overall development of kids and everyone, really. So we have a segment that's called Brain Break, where we encourage mindfulness and show kids very simple exercises that can help them with their emotions and their feelings. And especially in 2020, we thought that would be very important to include that. And then we have a fitness segment where Mr. Tavi, our fitness experts, demonstrates simple exercises that can be done at home to get your heart rate up, and also talks about the connection between the exercise and the ability to learn, and how we're all connected that way and one helps the other. At the end of each episode, we have a quiz called Brain Booster that basically recaps all the learning. And this is an interactive part where we ask a question and give 10 seconds for the audience to think of the correct answer, and gives them a chance to engage with the show. And health tips that are throughout the show are about all kinds of topics, from how to wash your hands and why it's important, how to make a mask at home using a piece of cloth, how to make a micro garden at home, and get nutritionist veggies growing, from a plastic bag, to what are vitamins and why they're important, and social distancing, etc., etc. Next slide, please. So we decided on Pan-African distribution, so we also thought it would be great to produce it in a Pan-African way. I'm based in Tanzania, but we have a studio in Uganda, and we have collaborators in Nigeria, South Africa, and Kenya. And here on this map, you can see what's happening where. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but it is quite a challenge to manage a Pan-African team, and it's not necessarily managing the workflow, but the management of assets, I think, is the most difficult part of it, and the upload and download, and still struggling with slow internet has been our biggest challenge. But it's been amazing to work with film professionals from West Africa and East Africa and South Africa, and we've also learned a lot how we can do it, and what are the, is it really worth doing it in that way, or doing it in a more localized manner. And we don't have the answers yet, but we've been enjoying discovering talent in various pockets of the continent. And last one, I don't have, I lost track of time, so I don't know how many minutes I have, but I'm about to wrap up, so we can have some more time for questions if I have time left. So when I was talking to Kabura to prepare this presentation, she asked me what's different about creating content for kids. So first of all, I think kids are a very demanding audience, and they're so genuine in their reaction. Like, if they love it, they love it, and if they're not interested, they just will do something else. They'll find a box and pretend it's a bus, and that can be more exciting than the animation on TV that's playing, and that doesn't trigger their curiosity enough. So know how to trigger their curiosity and spark their imagination. So get to know kids, either by spending time with them or by reading about them and reading from professionals who've done this, like the Sesame Street creators, Mr. Rogers, and many more. And then it's given us so much creative freedom, because in the kids' world, anything is possible. So you can clap and make your host become small and travel through the digestive system, which is what we're doing in an episode we have about food and digestion. We've been coming up with some ideas that wouldn't really fly for adults, but in the child's world, anything is possible, and you can really have a lot of fun with it. As the producer, or as anyone basically on the team, we've been really enjoying this. And then what's different is, distribution challenges and opportunities. It's I don't want to deliver bad news, and I know there's opportunities. I think Akili Kids TV has really managed to bridge that gap in Kenya, and hats off to you guys, what you have done. And I think you have proven that there's demand. But I know that many other broadcasters who we've been working with don't have the budgets for kids content, or just don't have budgets for even adult content. But with the proliferation of solar, and the fact that basically everyone, from the top of the so-called pyramid to the bottom, is more likely nowadays to have a TV screen. I think that's changing. There are a lot of online channels that are popping up. YouTube is making it a bit challenging, for example, to monetize kids' content because it's not allowed to collect data on kids, which many advertisers need. So I would say monetization on YouTube might not be as easy with kids' content. But I think 2020 has demonstrated that TV is such a great platform for education in the environment where distance learning is not really possible for the larger part of the population. Then television can be a substitute for it. So yeah, more content coming from Africa. I think it's the future. More kids' content being produced here and distributed.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Gosia. It's true. This 2020 has created really an opportunity to create content for children because they've been the ones who've really needed it the most during this time that they're out of school and at home. On Akili Kids, if we ask our viewers what their favorite programs are on Akili Kids, hands down, I think our very active social team and marketing team will always tell us that Akili and Me and Ubongo Kids are definitely some of our favorite TV programs for children. Christina, you've been in this business for a long time, so we're really looking forward to hearing from you next, the creators of Ubongo Kids and Akili and Me. And perhaps I can use this moment to clarify one of the questions that we also get a lot about Akili Kids and Akili and Me. So we happen to have the same name, Akili, but just to let our participants know that we're different companies. So Akili and Me is a program created by the wonderful team at Ubongo Media. We love their content. They do really great programming for children in Africa. And then Akili Network is the owner of Akili Kids, and we're a broadcaster. So that's the difference between us. We work very well together, and we're so pleased about the work that they do. Christina, let's hear from you.
Thanks, Kaburo. And actually at Ubongo, we used to dream about having a TV station, which from morning to evening just plays kids content. So when we heard Akili Kids has started, we were so excited. And the fact that you started during the pandemic here and thrived, that's amazing. So good on you. Yeah, so at Ubongo, we keep thinking the reason we started was, the 500 million kids. At least that was the last statistics that we updated across Africa under the ages of 13. Like how do we make sure that they can, face the world's development challenges and not only face them, but thrive them and have the capacity and confidence to be able to change their lives also. So that's why we started with building brains, building change. How do we build kids' brains in order to help them be able to change themselves, their community, and eventually the world? So you can go into the next slide. So something that we are very proud of, and it's one of the things that I would answer in how to make an effective kids TV is just create your own innovation. So what we've done is we really spend a lot of time on the research behind it. So whether it's literature that's already been done, whether it's, doing kind of on the ground research, whether it's user testing, prototyping, just really working with kids to be able to get their feedback in what works. I think in our first season of Akili and Me, we had like 100 different iterations before we came up with the show format that we did, because we kept going back to the kids. We kept asking them, what do they like? We kept trying out different things and then seeing if they liked it or not, if they understood it or not, if they really could learn something from it or not, until you get to a format where you say, okay, this could be effective. And then that's when we build it into the content that we have. So really localized educational research, really understanding even the psychology behind it, as Jesse was mentioning, the psychology behind kids learning, behind, wholesome development of a child, everything there is, just really spending time in that and then feeding that into the content. And then also using the power of entertainment. Kids, the universal language is the language of fun. For kids, no matter what language they speak, every kid wants to have fun. Every kid wants to watch something that is fun. So why not utilize that? Why not use fun stories? Why not use songs to be able to teach them something? Why do kids have to sit in a classroom and just write down whatever the teacher says? Why not try and make it fun? So that's kind of why we came up with the format that we did. And then we thought, why not leverage, the reach of technology, of mass media in Africa, whether it's TV, whether it's radio, whether it's basic phone, smartphone, however, whatever technology platform they can access, why not leverage that? Why not use that to be able to reach them? So our content is in different formats. Even if you just SMS, you'll get our content through SMS. Whether you dial in a number, you'll be able to get our content, as well as TV, radio, and right now we have even printables where, we partner with development organizations to be able to take our content on USB sticks and on printables to really be able to reach the last mile child. Because we understand that despite all the technology options there's still some kids who don't have access to that. And those are really the last mile children. So, really trying, and we've not perfected it, but really trying to see how can we reach those last mile children. So you can go to the next slide. And through all this, we came with our flagship show. So we started with Ubongo Kids, which is, like, as I mentioned in the introduction, which is ages 6 to 13. And it started with teaching maths, and then it evolved to math, science, and the whole STEM range. And then nowadays, more and more, the focus is on social education. So the concept of Utu, or shared humanity, just being kind to one another, good citizenship, and also really promoting the character strengths of curiosity, growth mindset, purpose, all those things that research across schools in Tanzania showed that that's actually the characteristics that kids are most lacking within Tanzania. So we just assume that also for the rest of Africa, it might also reflect that. So really putting that more and more in our content. And then the second show that we started with was Akili and Me. So for the ages 3 to 5, so Akili goes on the magical adventure every time she goes to sleep, and she meets friends who teach her English, and she learns English, she learns counting, alphabet learning, etc., etc. So really a fun show for kids to be able to use their imagination and learn through their imagination. And then realizing that kids learn at school, but also just as equally they learn at home. So really creating a show for the parents, which is then our Tunakujenga show, to be able to help them understand their child's development, understand what they can do with their child. So things like, if your child is helping you in the kitchen for perhaps sorting the vegetables, you can make it into a game, put all the green vegetables together or the orange vegetables together. So just really encouraging parents in how to understand their child's development and also how to aid their child's development. Because we feel like a lot of parents across Africa, especially those who have not gone to school, but their child is going to school, feel kind of left behind, feel like they are not able to help their child's learning. And then through all of this, we created Akili and You Toolkits, which is basically an online platform, and I can share the link later, where we have all our content in small sizes as well as printable formats, just really as a one-stop shop where anyone is free, anyone can go access it, to be able to then use it for their neighbor, use it for the neighborhood school, use it for kids that they know will be able to benefit from it. So that's kind of like what our focus is on. And then of course, through all of this, the different formats, like I mentioned, ebooks, print books, all of those are also available. So another thing of how to make good kids, TV is it also can go beyond TV, especially if you're talking about engagement and reach. So, if it works on TV, then also find how it can work in other formats also. If you go on to the next slide. But we don't stop only at saying, okay, we've done like prototyping and research, this is great, we've created something, we'll put it out there, but we really want to see the impact of it. So we really do rigorous impact evaluations and work with, for example, the researcher from Sesame Street. She's helped do our impact evaluation in Nigeria and Kenya, Tanzania, and some other languages to really see what's working and what's not. And when we see what's working, then then it's great. And when we see what's not working, then we use that to learn and then to be able to feed it into the next batch of content to make that even better. So right now we are on 17 million monthly household viewers, 9 countries, 9 different languages, and we're continuing to adapt and expand. We've seen, in our initial test, this is not the latest, in the initial ones, it's 12% higher cognitive scores, with parents really, enjoying it and saying how it's improved their children's lives, and also really being able to partner with organizations that have a strong message and a message that is in line with what we believe in, to be able to create content together. So you can go to the next slide. And something that we always think about is also to be able to make effective TV content. We don't want to always continuously rely on donor funding. Of course, that is very important, at least for Ubongo. But how do we kind of get away from that? How do we become more self-sustainable? So our amazing broadcast team, they look at always reaching to different countries, whether it's on VOD platforms, whether it's on free-to-air or pay TV, localization, because we believe that kids learn best in their local language, and you take away that stress factor of having to learn a foreign language and then having to learn a subject in that foreign language. So really trying to localize into the local languages, and then deepening impact by engagement, by, whether it's apps, whether it's SMS interaction, whether it's on the ground interaction. And really from that, really being able to create not just brand awareness, but being able to reach kids more and seeing how we can help them more. So if you go to the next slide. So, and we call it the Ubongo Classroom, which is not just TV, as in you're sitting in your home and you're watching TV, but we work also with video bandas, so video kiosks where, they air the show, whether it's the same kiosk that is airing football matches, why not in the meantime, in the spaces between football matches, why not air our content? Kids go there, parents go there, be able to watch, be able to learn. And just be able to do things with each other, because we believe that, it's also learning happens a lot through interaction. So building that sense of I can learn from my peer, I can learn from my neighbor, and really facilitating that. So you can go on to the next slide. And my colleagues Jesse and Gosia said it best in exactly their points on how to make good TV, and that's exactly what we subscribe to. That's exactly what we believe in. And something maybe I would add extra on top of that is, again, the fun. Kids want to learn. Kids want to have fun. So why not utilizing that? They don't always have to learn by being put down and said, okay, now is the time for learning. Like, it doesn't always have to be conscious. It can also be subconscious. It can also be through fun. So fun learning, African learning. So really strongly emphasizing the fact that, you can learn, yes, you can learn from anyone across the world, you can learn from their peers, but something we hold dear to us is helping them learn through relatable characters that look like them, characters that have the same cultural context as them, characters that give the same example as them, have the same hairstyles as them, really, to be able to really relate. And I think that's something that we really hold dear to us. And then the learning aspect, of course, you can put a kid in front of Tom and Jerry. I don't know if you'll learn anything, you might, but, really like to be able to learn through watching TV. Because if TV might not be, parents might not want their kids to spend hours on end in front of the TV, but why not do that time while learning something? And then across every technology, like I mentioned, like don't limit it, don't restrict it to what you think. TV is popular, but radio has more penetration, at least in some, countries in Africa. Really understanding what has penetration, what will reach the kids, and how do you format your content according to that platform. I think that's it for me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Christina. I think we really share your passion and belief in the opportunities that TV can bring for children to use that time to be entertained, but also really to learn something. So thank you so much. Thank you, Gosia, Christina, Jesse, for those presentations. I have a few questions that we've received previously that we'll go to. A lot of the questions we received is about distribution and the demand. But before I go into that, I want to ask about formats. Christina, you talked a little bit about that. I'll ask you, Jesse, to tell us a little bit, as a broadcaster, what are the formats that work best for TV? So we have a lot of producers who are, or potential producers who are participating in this webinar. They either already have an idea or may have already started doing something. What's the format that works best for TV? In terms of time or the style, what do you find works best for children and children's TV? And then Christina, you said, I think, did you say you had 140 iterations before you started? What, from those different iterations, what was working best? How did you settle then on the format that you have now for Akili Kids and Ubongo and me, and Gosia to talk a little, you will then also maybe give us a little insight into how you settled on your particular format. So Jesse, what's the format that works best on TV as a broadcaster? What are you looking for?
Okay, so really quickly, I think this is the beauty of having your own channel, which is we're open to pretty much any format in terms of the timing, whether it's animation or live action, as long as it's appropriate and there's a learning outcome and it's fun. So you know, I think that the way we always think about shows from a scheduling perspective is, where do we have gaps? What age groups do we have gaps in? For example, we have a gap right now in early childhood reading and literacy programs. So we're looking to fill that with either a show that we produce or something that we're going to get from someone else. We have gaps in programming for 7 to 12-year-olds. So I'm really interested in being able to find educational content that is really fun, that has some sort of value associated with it. And then I think when our biggest gap is in family programming. So we'd really like to get into more entertainment in the evenings that is appropriate and fun for everyone. And how do you do that? Well, I think when I imagine family entertainment, there are formats that I absolutely love that I think, wow, that could work really well, and parents and kids might really enjoy it. So, you know, I think about Disney XD's kind of comedy, dramedy formats where, you know, like Kicking It, which is about a bunch of kids hanging out at a martial arts school, and it's silly and it's fun, but there's always a message associated with it. So anyway, just, you know, from a length perspective, it could be a minute and a half. If it's a great idea, we'll find a place for it. If it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 11 minutes or 22 minutes or 45 minutes, like it's what you imagine as much as what we imagine.
Great, Christina, 140 iterations. How did you settle on the format? What did you find worked best?
I think one side of it is just kind of deciding, like, okay, it's not just, you know, with grant deadlines and grant deliverables, but it's also within as a company to say, okay, let's start with something, let's try with something. So we believe that, you know, you've done enough user testing, you've done enough prototypes, you work with you know, you go forward with what works at that time, and then as you do more M&E later on, you figure out, okay, how to change it, how to make it better. So it was really a matter of deciding, you know, we don't want to spend a whole year doing research. Maybe we'll spend 3 to 4 months doing research. Whatever we get from that, if we believe it's a good enough quality, we'll move forward with that and then see from there. And then almost like take it as being on TV and radio is your ultimate sample size, and seeing what response you get from that, and then continuing to iterate from that, and not to get too stuck on trying to make the perfect show and then, you know, it doesn't relate to anyone. So at least to get to the point where it relates to as many people as possible, and then you can always develop it further.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think getting started is most important. So Gosia, what influenced you to pick the particular format for Engine? Did you try any other formats, or did you have this as an idea going in?
So with Engine, we didn't have the luxury of 2 too much testing before we went into production and went on air for two reasons. We didn't have the time and we didn't have the money. We didn't have the time because COVID was happening, and we really wanted to put something out there ASAP. And also there were some funding opportunities that we wanted to tap into because we are mostly donor funded and Engine is mostly donor funded. Not everyone is as generous as Akili Kids TV, who pay producers for their content. There are a lot of broadcasters, especially terrestrial broadcasters, who just don't have the budgets to do it, but they have huge audiences and they have the eyes that our funders are interested in. So it's this whole circle of how the money goes and where to tap into the money pocket. So we also at PVI believe in the fail fast philosophy. So we just started producing segments that we thought would work for a show, and then saw how those little segments could be packaged into one show. And again, when you look at Sesame Street, it's it has these recurring segments. There's a theme for each episode, but then you always have the number of the day and the letter of the day, and you always have Elmo's World. So we thought, what could the segments be for our show? And again, since we didn't have time, we're like, who do we know who does cool things that attract kids? And I think this is what I encourage producers with small budgets and maybe not so well. I think time might be there, but the money is always the issue. So look around you. Who does fun stuff for kids? I take my kids to a playground, and there's this hilarious clown, and he does these fun things. So we filmed him. He kind of failed in testing, but then at my teacher's preschool, there was a guy who was teaching kids dance and showing up every weekend and showing them fun dance routines. And he has this amazing energy. And this is Mr. Tavi, who leads our fitness segment. So I was like, let's get Tavi on and shoot stuff with him on green screen, almost in my living room, because it actually happened in my neighbor's living room. This was COVID, and I'm in Tanzania, so there was no crazy lockdown, but we're still being very careful. So yeah, just see what is around you, like what kids respond to and who is interesting. Start small and start with what you have access to. And I think, that's a tip that I would give to producers.
All right, great. And while you're still talking, Gosia, we do have a question about selecting themes for each show. So you have a bit of a variety show, as you said. How do you select the themes for each episode?
Okay, ask me again because I lost the second part of your question.
How do you select the themes for each episode?
How do we select the themes?
Mm-hmm.
So we have our curriculum specialists, so educational specialists we work with. So it's a panel of experts in education. There's a person in Kenya, in Uganda, in Nigeria, and one in New York. And they basically advise us on what the topics should be, what kids are interested in, what is it that they may struggle understanding in school. For example, one of them said that she used to be a teacher, and she said her students always struggle with understanding photosynthesis. So we made it a point to make an episode about light and how it works. And to cover a variety of topics that are related to science. And again, this is our first season, so we're kind of learning as we go, and we're about to test the full season. And we have always admired how Ubongo Kids does the research, so we strive for that as well. And I guess then we'll know more what season 2 should look like. But again, for us, the audience are the most important. So what is it that kids like? Because Engine is an educational show, but we always say you have to entertain first. And only once you entertain, you can educate.
Yeah, absolutely. We really believe in that as well. So Christina and Gosia mentioned, you guys do such a great job at covering so many different topics with Ubongo Kids and Akili and me. So for example, Ubongo Kids, how many episodes have you done so far?
We have 5 seasons of 13 episodes each.
Wow. So getting to when you're at season 4, where do you go for topics and themes? Where do you find new content and new ideas?
We part of it is the zeitgeist, what is the urgent need across the world at the moment. So more and more our content is on health, even though it was already social education, the concept of utus, and then really doing roundtables, which involves teachers, parents, kids, members of the community, just really to get their input and what they think kids, what they think is needed at that point, what messaging they think is needed. And then of course some of it is also whatever co-production partner we reaches out to us or we reach to. So whether it's an episode on climate change or an episode on, for example, with the EU, we did an episode where they had originally wanted to do it about FGM, but we were like, no, it's too much for our audience, for the age of our audience, to talk about FGM. So why not talk about negotiation skills and consent and children's rights? So really just, it's the partner you're working with, it's the roundtable, it's what's needed in the world, it's what we believe, we want to teach kids. So those are the ways we just keep coming up with topics. Oh, I like that there's another Christina. I don't know what's going on.
All right, yeah, thanks for that. So Jesse, when we were creating Wabi, we also had wanted to cover a lot of topics. Our aim actually was to get, over 40 episodes. Where do you go for ideas for different topics?
Yeah, so when we were putting together our topic strategy, we looked at 3 different discrete academic areas, science, math, and literacy. And so those were our starting points, but I think we quickly realized that there were just some local things that we really wanted to address, that we wanted to touch on, like don't touch the GCO, and or basic financial literacy, like how many bananas can you buy with 50 shillings. Then there were some others that, as we started talking through the ideas of mental health, of emotional health, we did an episode on breathing, and this is something that we saw in NGen 2, which is great. It's helping kids understand when it's okay, when it's time to take a breath, and how to do that. And actually, one of my favorite episodes that I don't even think we've launched it yet is the idea of imagining what you can do with a line, right? Drawing a line and then imagining all the things that line could actually be. So it really was about finding things that touched on lots of different subjects that we felt were important and of value. And I think we came up with a short list of things that we were actually able to produce, but then a very long list of things that we weren't even able to get to. So part of it was just fun. What could we really have fun with while teaching some basic ideas around literacy, around science, around math?
Great. So yeah, there isn't a shortage of ideas out there. There's so much you can do. I think, Gosia, you talked about the beauty of doing content for kids is that, it's unlimited. Kids have a wide imagination and they're ready to, take on all sorts of contents and ideas, which is great. So one of the other questions that we've received a lot of queries about is about distribution. So what's the demand out there Christina, you guys distribute your content really across the continent. Gosia, I know this is your intention as well. We are a commissioning broadcaster at Akili Network. So we will be looking for to acquire content. We acquire content from all over the world, but we're really dedicated to also acquiring content from the region, from Kenya and from the region. I think, as has been mentioned in this webinar, it's really important for children to see themselves reflected back when they're watching television. So, Christina, what's the demand? What's the appetite for? How do you distribute your content? Who's buying children's content? For people who are out there producing content or already have something, where do you go? Where do you start? How can you distribute content across Africa, especially children's content?
I'm smiling because our awesome distribution manager and broadcast manager is on this webinar, and I really wish that he could answer that, but let me answer on his behalf. I hope I do him justice. Really, we try different ways. We go to, you know, the national broadcasters, because we were always like, you know, initially we said we'll start with the national broadcasters because we know that's free to air, and that's where a lot of kids who maybe don't have the money to pay for cable, they will probably have the national broadcasting station. So that's where we start. You know, we try and go on as many national broadcasters as possible, and that's kind of our foot into that country. Almost always it works. Sometimes it's a bit more difficult because sometimes national broadcasters want you either to pay them or want some kind of revenue share. But, you know, we don't have the money to be paying everyone for our content. Very few actually are willing to pay us for content. Some of them we have done revenue share agreements with them. But now more and more we've decided that it's okay to also start on either VOD platforms or pay TV, because, you know, as long as the kids get it, and then as the brand picks up, then the national broadcaster might also be able to be like, okay, even though I don't have the exclusive rights, I still want that content. And I think on the flip side in Africa, even though TV stations don't have budget to buy your content, on the positive side, it's that there is a strong need for content, and broadcasters recognize that. So it just takes a little bit of negotiation, takes a little bit of patience, and eventually, you know, something will give. And I think what we've seen also as distribution is not just on TV, but also how do you get your foot in the door? Do you have to start from, you know, USB sticks on the ground? Do you have to start with, you know, just kind of hosting an event and showcasing your show there? And then as the, you know, with word of mouth, and then people pick it up, and then it's taken to the TV stations. So really being able to be creative and flexible in how you want to enter a country and how you want to start broadcasting, and really being patient. Because, for example, with SABC in South Africa, it took us 2 to 3 years of negotiation on the contract stage. Like, it took one day for them to be like, yes, we want your show, but then it took 2 years for everything to be processed, you know, the legalities of it, the bureaucracy of it. So it's really being patient. It's, as you're waiting for that, why not try and see what other ways you can get your foot in the door? You know, like, we've been in Kenya for a long time. We started with the national broadcaster, then we went on Citizen TV, and then, you know, just moved around, and now we're on Akili network, Akili Kids network. So it's just trying out different options. That's what I would say. And it's also within your financial means. You know, we can't always hold off. We can't always wait, because we also have grant deliverables. We also have funders who they will continue funding if they see that we're broadcasting in a country. So for them, it's negotiating, does broadcasting mean TV? Does broadcasting mean YouTube? Because nowadays more and more kids, you know, they can access your content on YouTube. And there's some countries where we started on YouTube first before, you know, going into different platforms. So it's really just thinking outside the box and being like, what is the end goal? Like, if you want to get to kids, what is the end goal? Get to them however you can, and, you know, the rest will come from there.
Thanks for sharing that. There is a question about regulatory. So before I go to you, Gosia, about distribution,
can I just add one thing to what Christina was saying? So I think there is a belief in sub-Saharan Africa that children's television is not a business, and that's something that my partner and I have been trying to combat for years. And we are trying to, number one, prove that there is a business behind children's content, although it isn't necessarily as obvious as, hey, I'm advertising to kids. But really, the thing that I think everyone needs to understand is children's content is not about getting to kids by themselves. It's also about getting to their parents. And that phenomena is called co-viewing, and it happens in every other country outside of the African continent. In the US, co-viewing is huge. And when you think about shows like SpongeBob that are so big, yes, they're great for kids. It's fun and it's silly. And there's also themes and comedy that adults can appreciate. And they'll watch an episode of SpongeBob, even if they don't tell you that they will. So the business behind creating children's content is in its infancy, but that's one of the things that we're in business to do, is to help people understand that you can reach children and their parents and create revenue opportunities from that.
Yeah, that's talking a little bit about the business side of creating content for children. And there really is a great opportunity there, as we're finding. Just really quickly, Christina, to answer this question about regulatory approvals and all of that, what's that like? What's been your experience? Is it very bureaucratic? Well, you did allude to it with the 2 years that it took to get a contract.
Yeah, there's definitely some bureaucracy. There definitely is. I think, but a lot of it is also you can see that, you know, it's all part of the African culture. There's always some bureaucracy, but then there's always kind of, you know, just using that friendship, using that, you know, friendly communication, friendly relationships, and really, you know, getting someone ready to take your content, just feeding them on how great the content is, how necessary it is for the kids, you know, so just trying different ways. And I think with the COVID pandemic, you know, it really opened the doors to getting into more countries, because whereas before, you know, there was a lot of bureaucracy, or the process was long. Now suddenly, you know, with kids being at home, everyone wants to have their channel with kids content on. So I think it's sometimes it takes those external factors for the broadcasters to be like, okay, this is actually necessary right now, and, you know, we don't have to go through all that bureaucracy. And sometimes it is. So I don't know if I've answered your question exactly, because it's just really case by case. Yeah, that's what I would say.
Can I add something
Yeah.
with respect to Kenya? At least we try very, very hard to stay away from having to align with the curriculum standards, and we stay away from the Ministry of Education, and not because we don't like them, but because if we got caught up in having our content approved by them, then that could in fact really hamstring us in terms of being able to deliver new content and new shows that could be of value. And I'll tell a very short, quick story about book publishing. So book publishing in Kenya is hamstrung right now because every book that comes out for kids has to align to KFCB standards, and or KFBC standard, curriculum board, sorry, KFCB. So that really takes away from the idea of developing a culture of reading for fun, of being, you know, engaged because of your imagination, not because there's some real heavy learning that has to come out of it. So that's what we're trying to avoid. And one of the ways we did that when I worked at Scholastic was to really define ourselves as supplemental learning. You know, we're not a core curriculum product. We never want to be a core curriculum product. That supplemental learning is all that whole child stuff that I talked about. And the further you can stay away from it, I mean, we're not always going to be able to avoid it, but the further you can stay away from it, the easier it will be to avoid some of the issues that we might have.
Yeah, Jesse actually said something I didn't want to say. I didn't want to say that out loud, but we do avoid the Ministry of Education, and we do kind of position ourselves as, you know, entertainment more so.
Yeah, you have to.
Gosia, what's been your experience?
I mean, I second what you said. We never strive to achieve any curriculum standards or to consult ministries of education in the multiple markets that we wanted to distribute in. We've had some mixed, so to say, experiences with, for example, Ministry of Health, where some of our other shows that had specific health goals took a long time to be approved. So our MO is we ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So unless we really have to, unless it's a prerequisite by a broadcaster to have that stamp of approval from a ministry, we never show anything out of our own initiative to them and ask for that approval. And yeah, Engine is also a supplemental show. Like we do not strive, we do not aim at replacing the lesson. We don't follow a lesson plan that's part of the curriculum. Of course, we stay scientifically accurate, so all the information in the show is correct, but it may or may not be part of the lesson plan, the curriculum for that particular age group in those markets. But always interesting for kids.
Yeah, great. So keeping it interesting, again, we have a question about how to keep the interaction with kids. Christina, you have these wonderful characters on Akili and Me and Ubongo Kids. There's Mama Ndege, Uncle T. How did you guys come up with those characters and keep them so engaging? We find that even parents really love these characters and connect with them. What are your tips, or how can people create such engaging characters? How do you ensure that you're interacting with kids?
I think a big part of it is working with amazing artists. So one of our co-founders is actually the voice of Mama Ndege, and he's just like a natural artist. He's a drum teacher. He just, he's completely talented. So that was a big part of it. And I think another part was also the prototyping, kind of, you don't even have to just prototype formats. It can also be prototyping personalities of the characters, and I think we tried different versions of Mama Ndege before we got to the one where, it was just a crazy voice, crazy kind of characteristics, and that's what people relate to. We had originally started it as like, okay, this will be like the kind of teacher or professor character, and it started too seriously and we lost kids' attention. But the more and more you kind of relax and play around with it and be funny, and then it draws them in because it's funny, then you're like, okay, this is the right kind of character to be the teaching voice in the show. So I think it's prototyping. I think it's putting yourselves in the mind of a child. I think as adults, we tend to think, okay, we are making content for kids, so we do it through our age, our personality, how we relate to things. But then if you take all of that away and you put yourself in the mind of a child, like even if the character is doing silly stuff the whole episode, if that's what the child relates to, then as an adult, it's uncomfortable. But as a child, then, it's like that's what works. So really putting yourselves in the mind of the child, prototyping, being creative. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Mama Ndege can be silly for the entire episode sometimes, and it really works. I think people really enjoy it. Jesse, you've also worked with, creating characters and creating content that's really engaging for children. Do you have something to add to that? How do you ensure you're interacting with kids when you're writing or developing content?
Yeah, well, the first thing is actually interact with kids and, spend time with them. And for anybody who knows me personally, I can be absolutely ridiculous on a regular basis, and with kids even more so. And if you think like them, you can imagine things like them. So, and it's funny because as adults, we take ourselves way too seriously. So I'll throw out a little question here. How do you fit an elephant in a refrigerator? So the first thing you go to, I don't know about you, but I know many adults go, oh, you can't fit an elephant in a refrigerator. Or they start thinking, oh, you chop it up into little pieces, and it's horrible. I know posing that question to kids one of the first things they'll come up with was, you shrink it. Of course, if you shrink the elephant, it'll fit right into the refrigerator. So, you know, the laws of gravity, of reality, of time, of space, they don't mean anything. And what really means is what you perceive, and it can be silly and fun and different, and that's okay. In fact, it's better than okay. It's your imagination, and your imagination is the thing that will change the world. You know, Elon Musk didn't create electric cars because he was a grumpy guy sitting around going, we've got to make electric cars. It's because he imagined that there could be electric cars, right? We imagined that there could be people on the moon. We could imagine that we can do anything we want to do. And if we build that imagination and the resiliency to follow up with it and not be discouraged in children, then they grow up to be imaginative and to create wonderful things. So that's what we're trying to do.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, channel your inner child while you're doing content. That's just the way to go.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So the hour has gone really fast. I can't believe it. It's already going to 6:30. I can see the sun setting where you are, Gosia, and even here. So I want to thank everyone who joined us for this webinar. Thank you so much for giving us your time, for all the questions. We have some questions here on monetization and the business around content, which is another topic that we'd really love to cover. We want to do a series of events. So this one, we really wanted to focus on content and how to make good TV to get us started. So I think what we're going to do is schedule another series of and some more of these webinars to cover the other topics that have come up. So I want to conclude this particular webinar now. I hope that you've had some of your questions answered and had found some inspiration in the presentations that we've had today from Jesse, Gosia, and Christina. To close, I want to ask each of our panelists to maybe share some resources. I know each of you did mention some resources. I've been taking notes, and there are some resources in your presentations, which we will make all available. We're going to email everybody with the presentations and any of the resources that were mentioned here. But just to conclude, I'd like you, each of the panelists, to just maybe do a little conclusion of what we've talked about today. And can you share books? We've heard about documentaries, podcasts, blogs. Where can people go to really improve or get inspiration around creating content for kids? I'll start with you, Christina, then we'll go to Gosia, and then we'll go to Jesse.
So I just posted, I don't know if that was the right platform, I just posted on the chat for all attendees and panelists the link to our toolkits platform where you can access our content in different versions, and also a link to the different ways you can get access to our podcast. And of course, you can look for us on YouTube and Akili and me. Where to get inspiration, honestly, like no matter what our role is in the company, one or the other days of the week, you find us just going online, just like looking at different kids' content, looking at different kids' research, whatever. So online is a good source of inspiration. Of course, building partnerships, building networks, friends. I know everyone confuses Akili Network, Akili Kids with Akili and me. We're friends, but we're not the same entity. But kind of sharing that. Networking with each other, having conversations is always a good source of inspiration. I'm more than willing, and I know everyone at Ubongo is more than willing, if someone reaches out to us to ask questions, whatever it is, we are more than willing to reply. So maybe I'll just type in my email here, and that's what I will say for now.
Great, thank you so much, Christina. Gosia?
Jesse already talked about Mr. Rogers, and I'm a big fan, and I encourage everyone to watch the documentary Won't You Be My Neighbor, which came out a couple of years ago, and also the feature film starring Tom Hanks, which is called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which I think came out last year. For me, Mr. Rogers is like the Bible of creating kids content. And keep in mind, he conceptualized his show in the 60s, but some things like how kids develop just don't get old. and how they respond, how they feel, and what they need. And second, yeah, just spend more time with the kids. If you don't yet, or with that particular age group that you want to create content for, we've had some of our ideas just come up from kids doing things or saying things that an adult would have never thought of in their limited by now mind. Yeah, so I think that's all for me. And thanks everyone for listening, for attending. And yeah, I think Kabura, if you share, you can share my contact with everyone if you guys have more questions. And if I can think of other resources, I'll be happy to share with you as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Gosia. That's very generous. Jesse?
Yeah, so first, I just want to give a huge shout out to Christina and Gosia. Ubongo Media has been an amazing partner to us and an essential partner. And I think they're actually a big part of our success. So thank you. And Gosia, the NGen platform, I know we were excited about it the first time we saw it, and are just looking forward to continuing our ability to broadcast the great work that you guys are doing. So thank you for that. So Akili Network, we do a blog on our Akili Network website and also on our Akili Kids website. So I think there are lots of resources there that we regularly publish to kind of get into our heads about how we think about things. But I think the other thing is you can reach out and ask me or us anytime what we're looking for, what we're interested in, how we want to work with you. Our goal is to make great kids content for the continent. And that is, right now we're only in Kenya and our focus is in Kenya. And primarily that's not only because we have a love for Kenya, but also because we want to get it right. And I think getting it right means making stuff that is local, presenting it in a way that people connect to it, and really helping understand what our audience here loves. And I don't think that's going to work everywhere. Every country is going to have a different makeup of people, and we don't just want to roll the same thing out everywhere. So I think it really is about connecting with your audience and your kids and your families, and in doing so, we want to be the #1 place to be able to do that. So we want you, we want your content, we want you to succeed, and we want you to make money doing it because you can, and we're the poster child for that. So.
Great, thank you. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our panelists. If we were in person, we'd give you a big round of applause. Thank you for sharing your ideas and being so generous with being open to our participants reaching out to you. So for our participants, I will follow up with an email with the contacts that have just been, with the content that has just been shared and the contacts of our panelists. And please continue to email us, give us your, send us questions. We want to know what other topics you want to hear from us or what we can cover in this series of webinars. And hopefully soon in the future, we'll be able to do these events in person. So write to us at pitch@akilikids.com, and you can follow us on social media. It's Akili Kids and Akili Network on Twitter and on LinkedIn. And we're on Facebook as well with Akili Kids. So make sure that you follow us and ask us questions. We really do want to continue interacting with you guys. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to end it here. Have a lovely evening. Thank you. Bye.